Hi, I'm Dr. Kokethia Hill, CEO of BLAQUE KC. Our mission is to significantly improve the outcomes of African American children in public schools. Anyone who starts to look at some of the challenges that's facing Kansas City, certainly looking at unemployment, looking at crime, looking at housing, evictions, looking at low participation, voter turnout, looking at blighted and disinvested communities. We certainly understand that Kansas City's greatest asset is not the streetcar or the downtown hotel, or not even my beloved Chiefs. That's not Kansas City's greatest asset. Kansas City's greatest asset is its people. We have to make sure that all Kansas City is able to have equitable opportunities to thrive and succeed and have representation in spaces, whether that's in C-suites, whether that are CEOs, whether that's in heads of executive directors, whether that is people who are working at all levels of our city. But if we care, we can't just have the care in our hearts. We have to have the care in our action. And what that means is that this school system is not a system that's absent of people. People run these systems. And if we are unhappy as a community with the outcomes that a system is producing, any system, then we have to think about what is our agency, where is our locus of control, and how do we push on that system? And so right now, these are our kids. These schools exist to serve us. Schools don't exist outside of families and kids. Every parent is trusting these systems to deliver. And so we are there as advocates to say, hey, not to beat systems down and to beat people down, but to say, hey, we've got to work together. We've got to have some different conversations, and we need more people at the table to figure out how do we adjust these systems so that they serve all kids, all kids, all kids, and particularly those who have been the most marginalized better.
Hi, I'm Sly James. I'm very proud to support BLAQUE KC's efforts to improve educational equity in this city. It's needed, it's important, and thank you.
See what's possible for me.
I absolutely love that video, and thank you to Dr. Hill and BLAQUE Kansas City for co-hosting with us today. Couple of notes before I start actually speaking to the candidates. First and foremost, we invited all candidates to join us today. Mr. Abarca fell ill, and so he will not be joining us this morning. Ms. Manser is at an event at Central High School this morning, so she will not be able to join us. And Ms. Cortez is engaged in another event at the moment, but I think she might be joining us at some point as well. And also from our perspective, from Rev Ed's perspective, this is not an endorsement of any particular candidate or campaign. We are here simply to connect and engage with our potential candidates for a school board. So having said that, good morning, buenos dias. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And we will get started. Candace, I'm gonna ask you the first question here, which is introduce yourself and let us know something about you that we don't know already.
Hello, everyone. My internet is a little bit spotty, so can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So my name is Candace. I am running first. Thank you for having me today. Edgar, it's good to see you. I am honored to be in this space. I admire the work that you all are doing. And I am just so excited to speak with you all today. Again, my name is Candace. I'm running for the 5th district seat on KCPS board. I'm new to this space. I have learned a lot. I have 2 beautiful children. One is in the 3rd grade at Crossroads Academy. I have a 3-year-old who's starting in the fall at Holiday Montessori. I started my journey in urban ed through UMKC's Institute for Urban Education. I've taught for a little bit. I went on to open a preschool, and now I have kind of gained some roots at Kansas City teacher residency for the last 4 years. I'm a teacher educator. I am the early childhood methods instructor, and I'm a continuum coach. And in that role, I'm in classrooms every day, working closely with teachers, affirming and pushing for effective instruction. Um, I'm trying to think. I for the past 2 years, I've worked with parent organizing groups, talking to parents and families, and with students about their trials and triumphs. And I really value parent voices and the decision making process. And so I've been working to amplify those voices for the past couple of years. And so I would consider myself an advocate for public education through my experience, my professional experience, and just as a parent, especially with my kiddo entering the district. If I could think of one thing that nobody knows about me, is that I am a terrible cook. And I don't let people know that. I don't let people know that. So if I have friends over, don't look in the trash can because I have a bunch of empty containers. I just put them all in my fancy dishes. So, not a lot of people know that about me, but, I just say I'm too busy to cook. But I'm actually a terrible cook.
Well, I appreciate you leading with honesty to begin with. I will be mindful of never eating food that you make. So appreciate that. Thanks so much for being here, Candace. And Tanisha, same question.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. What a beautiful Saturday it is. I too, Edgar, look forward to getting outside and enjoying some of the sunshine as well. Thank you all so much for hosting this conversation. Really excited to be here. I am Tanisha Nooner Ford. I'm born and raised Kansas City girl, been here most of my life with the exception of about 3 years when I decided I wanted to get out of the Midwest and move out east to escape Midwest life. But outside of that, I've been in Kansas City my whole life. I'm a wife and mom of 2 kids, 2-year-old Harper and 4-year-old Dawson, who also will be attending holiday in the fall. He will be starting kindergarten. So I'm excited about that, but also really nervous. That's my baby, and I can't believe that it has already happened, that it's time for him to start kindergarten. I would also consider myself to be an education advocate and an educator as well, though I have never taught. I have worked in supporting young people my entire career, which has spanned 16 years. 3 of those years were out east, as I mentioned, as a practitioner in higher ed, working at 2 different universities. And then in 2008, life brought me back to Kansas City, and I was given the opportunity to serve students through the Kauffman Scholars Program. So I've been there for 13 years. I've worked as a college advisor, several other roles in between, and now I currently serve as the executive director of that program. So I've been supporting students for years. It is my passion and absolutely has become my life's work. And that work is what led me to have the desire to support more students in our community through school board service. So just wanting to give back in a greater way. And so really excited for the opportunity to use my experience, my passion, and my voice to support students and families in Kansas City. I'm also a product of this district. Most of my education was obtained in this district. And so I love this district. My children are going to be here. And so I just want to do my part in order to build upon the work that's taken place the last few years and continue to make our district even better, tapping into all of the community resources that we have here to make that happen. A few things that people may not know about me, I'll give you 2 things. I'm probably one of the most particular, that's what I like to say, it's a nicer way of saying picky, when it comes to food. There's a lot of things that I do not eat, meat, and I'm probably one of the people you don't want to go out to eat with because I'm going to change up every menu item. And then the second thing people may or may not know about me is that last year I decided that I wanted to train and complete a marathon. And so all of last year I planned to run a marathon. It got canceled because of COVID, and I decided to do it anyway. And so I did it in Kansas City. And so I'm in the 1 or 2% of the world who has actually run 26.2 miles. And so I think that just speaks to my discipline and my drive. And when I set a goal and something that's important to me, I work hard until I am able to accomplish it. So that's something else that folks may not know about me.
Thanks for that, Sinisha. What's harder to run, a marathon or a school board race?
Definitely school board. I would run a marathon.
I appreciate that. Alec, the floor is yours.
Awesome. And thank you both for sharing. I think one thing you both touched on was your deeply rooted experience, both in Kansas City and education itself. Given that, what is your vision for this district going forward, especially after the pandemic?
I'll start since you started last time. I think my vision for Kansas City public schools is really that children will always be at the center of all of our decision making and everything that we do. I've kind of adopted the tagline that has definitely become more of a way of life for me throughout this campaign, and that it's children are our priority. So I just want to make sure that in all of our conversations, I've thought a lot about this campaign trail the last few months, and I've just learned that a lot of times the conversations are not student focused, and that makes me sad. And so when I think about the future of Kansas City public schools, I want to make sure that we always have our students at the center. It also would be a world where there are no racial or economic disparities, that all students are able to achieve and to establish levels of success, that all schools are able to achieve levels of success as well. And so we're able to see growth and success for all students at all schools. I think that that's something that's going to be really important for us moving forward. I would also add in that our community, our district, there's a strong sense of strong culture and care and concern. Folks feel included. Folks feel like they belong. That's teachers, that's students, that's staff. That's community as well, that we have a voice and we have a say in implementing the changes that we want to see for our district. And the last thing I would say is that we are, as a community, as a district, are not comfortable with status quo. We don't get complacent. This is going to be forever work for us. And so I think that we should always be working towards making improvements, making changes, and pushing the line.
Candace?
Yeah, so I will say this over and over again. I would love to see our district be globally competitive. I want all of our schools, all of our classrooms to be quality, right? And thus making KCPS the choice for KC parents. Just a district that really honors and invests in just a variety of pathways for success, not just college, but one that's responsive to, the demands of, different work industries and student interests. And then lastly, I would say a district that attracts and retains teachers of color. That is a national problem that we're experiencing. And so I believe that KCPS can be a model for how we do this.
I appreciate those thoughtful responses, Sinisha and Candace. Just a quick question. I see that the audience is asking questions. So Candace, I'm going to go ahead and kind of shift the mode here real quick. There is a question from Katie Schrader. Ms. Buckner, with an older child in KC's charter system and a younger who will just now be entering KCPS, is it your intention to keep your younger child in KCPS, or will he also transition to Crossroads? Do you have any personal experience as a student or parent with KCPS, within KCPS?
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely intend to stay in KCPS, to keep my son in KCPS. I think I made a decision to put my daughter where she is because of who she is as a student and as a person. It was a great fit for her. And, you know, I think as parents, we do what's best for our kids. And that is part of the reason why I chose KCPS, namely the Montessori model for my son, because of who he is and how he responds as a student, and you know, what I want to see for him. And so I would like to see the district value all parents' decisions in that way. So I think it's critical that we have options within our district to do that.
I appreciate that, Candace. And Tanisha, I'll ask you a modified version of the question. Why did you choose holiday?
Oh my goodness. So I was really excited about the opportunity for him to attend Holiday. It's actually a school that was not on my radar. We, of course, for the last few years have been thinking about all of the schools that are available in our system. And up until probably November of last year, I was wanting my son to go to Foreign Language Academy in the district, and that was our number one choice, until I attended a city school fair and I spoke with the leaders of Holiday for an hour. And it was like my own time with them for an hour where I got to ask questions. And so Holiday quickly rose to the top of my list. I've actually never visited the school inside, but I was just blown away by the teaching staff, by the principal, by the virtual tours. I know my son as well, and I believe that best fit is a real thing. It's something that we talk about a lot in the college advising space, where you look at children individually and you figure out the best option for them. We did the same thing for my son. He is a boy, he's very busy, and I just felt like he would best thrive in that Montessori environment. And so I looked at Holiday, I fell in love. I love the student demographics. I love the demographics and representation that I saw in the teachers and administration as well. And I think that all of those things, on top of just their student outcomes and how they've been able to achieve success in that way, all of those things are important. So I'm super excited for him to start there in August. And I will be somewhere crying on the first day when it's time.
We'll be crying together.
Yeah.
And I just cry all the time. So I appreciate those responses. Alec?
Yes, my next question is just kind of going into how you plan or have served students and parents within this district. I know both of you mentioned about your students, so give us a little bit of context of what it was like or what you have been doing. We could start with Tanisha. Sorry.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I have served at Kaufman Scholars for the last 13 years, and we've served a little over 2,500 students altogether, and just about half of those students are KCPS students. And so that is my direct way of how I've supported students in Kansas City Public Schools. One thing that's unique about our program is that we also have a parent arm, which has really shaped my perspective on how the importance of partnering with parents in improving outcomes for their kids. And so I've also engaged with all of those parents as well through our parent supports and our parent engagement strategies. I've also served on the board of Show Me KC Schools. It's an organization that makes parents in Kansas City aware of all of the educational options for families in Kansas City. And so I've supported students and parents in that way, mainly parents. And then the last way that I would say that I've supported students in this district, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to serve as a Girls on the Run coach for that program. And so for 3 years, it was my choice where I wanted to serve, and I wanted to serve in a school that was within the district. And so I chose Faxon Elementary. And so I got to work with several young ladies for about 3 years, serving as a coach through that program. So professionally, and then also through my civic endeavors, I've been able to support students and families in Kansas City Public Schools.
I would say that I've indirectly served students through, of course, my support of teachers and their quest to be more effective and transformative in their teaching practices. And then again, for the past couple of years, I've been working with parent organizing groups just to really amplify their voices and engage parents on strategies to partner with schools. You know, parents just want to be heard. Their voices, I believe, should be valued. And I've just been working to ensure that that happens.
I appreciate those responses. I've heard the term student-centered mentioned a couple of times here in this conversation. And so my question for you, what is, as if you're elected and you serve on the board, how do you define a positive student outcome? And Candace, we'll start with you. The famous line of 2020 and 2021, you are mute, Candace.
Sorry. I would just name that first. You know, student achievement data is not the only measure for success, right? It is our reality, but it's not the only measure. I absolutely believe that, you know, growth and the love of learning and student efficacy and agency is critical and a determinant of the success of the district. You know, our students are, KCPS produces leaders, change makers, and I think their commitment to reinvesting in the district is a measure of success. So absolutely, while we do have the reality of our state standard, which I will add is a very low standard, and is a measure of success, I think there are other ways to measure it as well.
Thank you for that, Candace. Tanisha?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that. I think state standards, testing via it being state tests, standardized tests for college, ACT, SAT. I think that is just one measure that we can argue if that's the best measure or not. I know there's a lot of controversy around some of those tests and really what they mean for Black and Brown students, but they are the standard that we have to measure to right now. But when I think about outside of those standards, I think definitely the joy of learning, excitement for learning. When you see, you know, a light bulb and go off in a student's head when they're excited and passionate about learning more and they continue to learn all they can about a certain subject, I think that is definitely positive student outcomes, that they understand that learning is lifelong and that is something that continues and that you never just reach that point where you just tap out of learning. It's something that you will always be striving to learn and do more of. And then I would say, I think when that light bulb goes off for a student and they get excited, I think another student outcome is how that translates to other members of their family. I think it's one thing that I've seen in the Kauffman Scholars Program when students really get excited about learning and they're doing well in their own way, that starts to translate to younger brothers, sisters. Sometimes it translates even to parents that get inspired by their children learning. And so I think it's definitely the student and their love and their excitement, but how it translates and starts to create a ripple effect throughout families and throughout our community.
I see a couple questions in the chat. I think just to stay kind of in the same topic, I'll move on to the second question from Monet, 17-year-old junior, who asked, everyone but the youth is included on decisions about their education. Do you plan on changing that? And maybe just to alter the question or to add on to that, what would you do to incorporate their voices going forward into education? We'll start with Candace.
Sorry. You would think that I know how to work Zoom by now, a year into this. I always start talking without unmuting myself, but I believe that KCPS students are the most critical stakeholder that KCPS has. I would love to see student representation on the board. I'm very proud to see that there are student advocacy groups or a student advocacy group that presents at board meetings, and they're doing some phenomenal work. But I just wonder about the ways that this group or more students can be more visible and considered in the decision-making process. Um, and so I would just say, I want to, as a board member, I want to speak directly to students. That means being visible and accessible. And then, I've spent my campaign just like talking to parents and talking to students. And one gap that I've noticed is that, students, aren't really aware of who and what the board is and the function of the board. And so it's just really hard to encourage students to kind of step into that power when they don't understand the impact of the board and governance and policy. And so I just think this is just really critical because especially if we want them to be involved, they are the most impacted by these adult decisions. And so I think just first awareness and ensuring that the adults are pulling them in and engaging them in transformative ways.
And I would agree with all of that. And I think that's probably been one of my biggest takeaways, I think, over the last 3 months is that same part of your question is that students are often the last on the list to be considered. I don't think that there should ever be a time where we are discussing a new initiative, a new program, a new anything that's going to directly impact students where we don't tap into students and get that student voice. I do agree that they are the most important stakeholder. And I think we can absolutely do a better job of being more proactive in how we communicate with students. I think a lot of times, right before a decision is made, or we take a plan that's already fully baked and then we want them to react to what has already been decided. I would love to make sure that we are finding ways to have more of that proactive student voice versus a reactive kind of situation. I think it would be phenomenal if we could have a student representative on the board. I think that would be incredible and show that we really do value that student voice. I would love to see opportunities to engage with students in those advisory groups in between board meetings as well. So not just once a month or twice a month when it's time for a board meeting, but what does that look like in between? I think all of those opportunities are important and critical.
Thank you, Tanisha and Candace. And by the way, just a special shout out to Monet. Love that we have a student here asking questions and holding their potential leaders accountable to these questions and to these commitments. So thank you for being here this morning. I'm going to pivot just a little bit because I see Kim Riley, she has a question, but I think it ties into a question that we were planning to ask. With 80% of special ed students nationwide being Black and brown, and Black boys being referred to special ed 4 times higher than any other demographic. So we're talking about student data related to Black and brown students. So my question, first and foremost, will be, how familiar are you with Black and brown student data at the district level? And can you share a little bit about that, Tanisha?
Sure, I'm pretty familiar. I've definitely been paying attention over the years and have just increased that intensity in learning more. It's very clear to me that our Black and brown students, maybe add in our low income students and special needs students, we're seeing the worst outcomes across systems, that's district and charter, for those communities of students. And so I think the important piece is just acknowledging that is the place that we are. Jim Collins refers to them as brutal facts. And those are the things that we have to acknowledge and just accept that they are truth and they are fact. And then you can begin moving forward with figuring out ways to strategize and accelerate the learning. And so I think when you put that information out there, and I've personally experienced being called negative or angry or things like that when I share that data and when I share that brutal fact. And so I just think that it's important for us to start from that place. I know that there's a lot of energy being directed towards how we can improve outcomes in the small way that impacts accreditation. And we have a laser-like focus right now. And I know that that's going to be incredible for our school district and our community. But I want to see that same level of energy, that same level of acceleration and laser-like focus to speak to the outcomes that we are seeing in our Black and Brown communities. I think that equity is going to be extremely important in addressing that. I understand that there is an equity policy in place. It's the first board policy, but I think that there are opportunities for us to continue to take that policy from theory to practice. And when we say equity, that means reallocating resources to the groups of students, to the schools that need it most, to teacher support. There's ways that we really need to be aggressive and intentional and be radical about improving outcomes for those students. When we do that, that will naturally improve the outcomes for our overall district and all students overall. So I think we need to be honest, tell the truth, and then just be really relentless in addressing outcomes for those communities.
I will just add that I'm pretty familiar, just aside from my experience in classrooms. Data on the district level is what really inspired me to run for this seat. And the reality is that no matter where you send your student in the city, the outcomes for Black and Brown students are the same. And so it's obviously a systemic issue. The outcomes are dismal, and the response to the data just hasn't been urgent enough for me with Black children in the system. And I know not for other parents with children in the system. And so I just wonder, at what point do we become transformative and innovative and all things that Tanisha pointed to? There just has to be a sense of urgency. And you do that by first acknowledgement, like Tanisha named, and just beginning to restore in that way. And then that's when we start to move the needle. But we have to put a sense of urgency. It's time to hit the gas. It's time to hit go. And we do that by collaboration with, community partners, with students, with families, and just being really innovative in our approach with an equity lens.
I believe there is a follow-up question to that. It was just why is it important to actually slice the data according to the different layers of identity, like race? And we could start with Tanisha.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you start to slice, disaggregate, drill down the data, you just start to see how sometimes the outcomes can worsen. What I like to say is sometimes data can be hidden, especially when you look at it by certain schools. And so we figured out how to achieve success for students at certain schools. But once you really drill down and look at race, look at income, you start to get to some brutal facts and some real truths. And so I think that that's why it's important. It's easy to hide when you look at certain schools and you look at the larger masses of students as a whole. But when you start to drill down into disaggregated groups, you start to see a different story, and it paints a different picture that speaks to the need for that urgency that Candace was just talking about.
And I'll just add to that. I agree with everything. I just think that our data can tell any story that we want it to tell, right? But once we start slicing and disaggregating this data, it will tell the truth. And so I think that is the most important reason why we absolutely have to do it.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm curious, let's assume this is April 7th. You all have been elected. What's your plan in the first 60 days? what are you going to do in the first 60 days after being elected?
Yeah.
Candace?
So obviously I would need to meet with Dr. Bedell and just get to know him and his vision, namely his vision, his 2030 plan. And then also just like connecting with and beginning to build some relationships with existing board members. We know that this has been an election season like we haven't had in a very long time. It's just been one of a kind. And so I think it's important that, some relationships are restored, and that because and I've said this before in forums that teamwork makes the dream work. And so we have to have a collaborative board. We have to have a strong board in order to move the needle. And then I would just say that I will continue. I've been doing this before my campaign. I want to continue to engage with parents and students. That's something that I'm going to ride on. That's what I want my board legacy to be. That if they know anybody on the board is going to listen and talk to them and really ensure that their voices are amplified, it'll be Candace.
Thank you for that, Tanisha.
It'll be Candace and Tanisha. Let me just add that in. But one of my key priorities during this last 3 months of campaigning has been to start with this place of listening, learning, and leading. And when I think about starting any new opportunity, whether that's a nonprofit board, a new job, you come in and you have your understanding, but it's been from a peripheral view. And so now that you are in and you have access to more information, I think it's your duty to try to absorb as much information as you can, to listen to all of the different individuals, to learn all of the information that you didn't know. And so I would definitely make sure that I am taking the time to meet with the superintendent, try to build relationships with the other board members, because that collaboration is going to be key. I understand that one of the first responsibilities of this new board will be to approve the budget. And so making sure that I am getting a better understanding of that. I've listened to the last few board meetings where they've started to talk about that budget process. And so just taking those early pieces of information and then adding on the extra layers of more information, possibly meeting with the CFO, whomever I need to meet with to get more of an understanding that I need in order to make informed decisions in approving that board budget will also be important. And then when you are campaigning, you just hear a lot of input from students, from parents, from community members and other stakeholders as well. And so another piece to me for that next 60 days or that first 60 days is figuring out what a continued engagement plan might look like. I think that it's important that you continue to engage with all of those people beyond just the election cycle. So figuring out a realistic way of doing that will be a part of my 60 days.
Appreciate those responses, Tanisha and Candace. A follow-up. So Candace, I heard you mention that this has been an election like no other before or no other recently. Actually, and I want to tie in Mr. Brown's question to this. What have you learned in this experience for running through for school board, first and foremost? And then secondly, are there any narratives that you wish to dispel that have appeared throughout your campaign? And Candace, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. That's a really good question. It's a very complex question, but I think the cut and dry is this. I got into this space, coming from this teacher world where, teachers want the best for their students. And there's a lot of, folks out there that, will ride for these kids, right? A lot of teachers. I'm coming from a teacher lens. And when I entered this space, I thought that it would be the same because we're talking about the same students. When in reality, this has become I've learned that it's more about adult ego than anything. And it has turned a corner that isn't really rooted in what's best for students. The conversations haven't been on what we need to do to move the needle. It's been about them versus us, or what's happening on the systemic level. And while those things are very important, our data doesn't communicate that we should be having those conversations. We need to be having conversations about students and their achievement and what we need to do to make that happen. And so I've learned a lot. This has been a great experience, but when I first entered, I was really disheartened by, how much we're not talking about students. And then if I could just negate any narrative that's out there, I just want to be real frank and say that I have I'm not a politician, and I have no special interest besides Marquise at Southeast, besides Jamie and her 3 kids at Truce. These kids and their families are my special interest, and that's what I'm doing this for.
Tanisha?
Edgar, was the first part of the question what has surprised me?
It was not. It was more like, what has the experience been? But you can definitely include the surprise.
Oh my goodness. The experience has been interesting, I would say, for me. I knew coming into my particular race that it would have its own set of challenges because I'm running against an incumbent, and that just comes with all that it comes with. But I definitely kind of very early on, I just felt like there was a lot of opposition. I felt like there wasn't really any questions about my skills, my experiences, or whether I could be a good board member or not. It was more about, my affiliations and why would I choose to run against an incumbent. And so I think so those narratives have kind of really shaped my experience in running at large. I think that Kansas City, our school district, and of course our country has a deep, dark racial history and a lot of division. And I think that maybe some of the things that we have been seeing over the last couple of months have really just risen to the top because of all of these kind of hidden things that we have not the conversations that we haven't really discussed or talked about as a community. We haven't talked a lot about the racism, a lot of the segregation, and a lot of those things that were a part of the forming of our school district that are still very present in our district today. And so my experiences have been very interesting. It's been a number of different, views about me. And so I have just chosen to make sure that I'm staying grounded. I came to running for school board because I wanted to support kids. I wanted to support my community. And that stayed at the center of my why. So whenever I come up against opposition, I just make sure that I keep that at the forefront. But it's been a very divisive race. It's also made me a little bit sad as well when I think about all of the conversations, the forums, and how little they have to do with students. I see like a lot of times we're talking about everything else but student outcomes. We're talking about which model is better. We're talking about how, this entity is being impacted by this dollar amount. And again, the furthest thing away from a lot of the conversations have been students. And so that's been sad, but it's also reinforced in me why we need to continue to make sure that they are at the forefront. The narratives that I would say that have kind of been out there about me that I want to definitely make sure I dispel is that I have some desire, me as one person, Tanisha, have a desire to disrupt or dismantle the school district. Is something that is completely untrue. I think my career has proven that I care about young people, that I care about education. And obviously I'm putting my children in this school district. And so it doesn't make sense. And so those have been the biggest things, along with my working for an organization, Kauffman Scholars, and maybe concerns about that affiliation and how I funded my campaign has also been a challenge that I want to dispel, that my financing has come from individual people, friends, people at my church, people who know Tanisha, who support Tanisha and desire to see change and fresh perspectives on this board. So it has been an interesting 3 months, and I think we are going to need a lot of repair, and we're going to need a lot of healing once this election cycle is over in order for us to really move forward and support our kids in the way they need to be supported.
Thank you for those responses. Alec?
Yeah, no, thank you. There's a couple questions that are revolving around retention rate for teachers and administrators, specifically of color. And so we have mentioned this, but what are your main priorities moving forward and strategies in order to have that retention rate increase in the following years?
Well, this is a question that has definitely come up over the last couple of months, and I'm glad that it's come up because it makes me aware that it's something that people are paying attention to. There's all of the data that speaks to how all students perform and have a better educational experience when they are taught by and are supported by teachers of color. So not just Black and brown students, but all students. And so I start from that place. I've heard the conversation around the equity policy that we have in place, and kind of that being the framework that supports the district being able to be relentless in recruiting and retaining teachers of color. I think I would love to see us go a little bit further. I would love to make sure that it's a part of strategic plans, because I think we need to have goals and we need to have metrics in place for it to be something that we hold ourselves accountable to. And so I think we can do a lot more to make sure it's something that happens. I would love to see the district absolutely pay teachers more. I think that is one thing that's really important. But I also want to make sure that teachers are finding themselves in inclusive environments where they feel like they belong, where they see themselves as being of value. I think creating those spaces are also important. Finding ways for the district to connect with these other community entities in order to support teachers of color. So whether it's the LEC or Cornell, I see that you're on here, BLAQUE, your entity, all of these entities exist in our community, which seem to be an automatic go-to in order for us to support teachers of color. Also thinking about their mental wellness. There are a lot of different partnership opportunities that I think we could put in place to be able to support retaining teachers of color. Also thinking about the pipeline issue for recruitment, going back to the younger ages, seeing how we can reframe the teaching profession and attract younger students to the profession as well. Partnering with HBCUs, that's a natural one as well. There are a number of things that we need to be doing in order to solve that problem that I know is not unique to Kansas City alone.
Yeah, and I'll just go ahead and echo that. I know that it has been mentioned that the district is attracting more teachers of colors by some of their initiatives, reaching out to working with HBCUs, and through their teacher pipeline organizations. And so, I'll name again that this is a national problem. Fortunately, we have some amazing organizations, the grassroots organizations right here in Kansas City that are working to ensure that we diversify our teacher corps. And so I do want to name the reason why these were birthed, right? Why these grassroots organizations have to be there, because we have the data that shows us, like Tanisha named, all students do better when we have teachers of color in classrooms. And then also, I just want to call attention to the teachers that we do have. A lot of times these teachers are placed in disciplinary roles and aren't valued, right? So we have to think about how we change the culture within KCPS to really value our teachers of color, because they do have value and we have the data that shows it. And so we have to first ensure that we create a culture that's inclusive and attractive, so that when we say, hey, we need you to work here with KCPS, they have a reason to want to do that, right? And we have strong cultures and support systems in place for those teachers.
Thank you for those responses. We know that teacher diversity is a huge issue within the greater Kansas City metro area altogether. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that only 1% of educators in the Kansas City greater metro area identify as Latino. And so appreciate that commitment and the questions from the audience around teacher diversity and teacher support. I do see a question on here from an anonymous attendee. I assume it's for Revolución Educativa, so I'll go ahead and answer that. Are you sponsored by School Smart, and do you support school choice? So from a Revolución Educativa perspective, we actually receive seed funding from School Smart KC Action Fund, which is a 501c4. And we as an organization are supportive of 51,198 Latinx students across the greater Kansas City metro, regardless of where they attend. Also, as an organization, I would be remiss to mention that we, as part of our grant agreement, we can actually engage in political activity. And so none of our dollars are to support or endorse any candidates at the moment. So appreciate that question and appreciate the call and nod to transparency there. I see a question from Christy Moreno. And I'm going to go ahead and ask it in Spanish. ¿Cómo van a involucrar a los padres que hablan español? How are you going to engage Spanish-speaking parents in families? And Candace.
Yeah, that's a great question. Hello, Christy. I will just say that it is imperative that we partner with Spanish-speaking families. We know that our Latinx student population is growing within the district, and so we have to be responsive to that. I think we have to ensure that we are attracting, translators and bilingual parents to really stand in the gap, and ensuring that we are responsive in our equity approach. Okay, so thinking about our communication, what are the different modes of communication, and how can we really connect with Spanish speaking parents, not just a one-way communication, but how do we ensure that it's two-way? And I think just ensuring that we have an equity lens and all the tools in place, including translators and in having, I would say, on the leadership level, ensuring that we have Spanish-speaking leaders.
Gracias por esa respuesta, Tanisha.
I would agree with all that Candace has listed as well. It's something that at my organization, Kaufman Scholars, we have valued throughout time. Over, our population of students, our demographics, very similar to the district's demographics. And so one thing that we've made sure that we do is in any setting, any convening, when we are having parents that need translation, we have the devices that we are using to make sure that Spanish translation is being provided. We make sure that any communication that we send out is always translated. we make sure that we are meeting our families exactly where they are. When I think about equity and that policy, I think that this is a way to make sure that we are allocating resources in a way that would be able to support families that do need that translation. And so I think it's something that's really key given the growing population. And I would want to make sure that we are tapping into all of the community resources and that board members are being held accountable to make sure that those supports are being provided. So making sure that we always provide the space.
Edgar,
Gracias, Tanisha. Go ahead, Alec.
I see we're getting close on time, but I really do appreciate this next question. So moving forward, I just want to see if both of you all have maybe another 5 minutes to spare to ask this question. Candace and Tanisha. Okay, we'll go ahead. So it's a two-part question. The first one is following up on special education. How familiar are you with special education processes and requirements on how would you approach conversations around equity, including students who receive SPED services? My observation is that those students and their parents often get lost or be behind. Oh, it disappeared. No worries, I got it. I'll pick it up. Students and the parents often get lost behind and they're not valued. And the second part to that question is, what are your thoughts on working with district leaders to ensure they're leading well? I like the talk of amplifying student and parent voices and being student focused, but Dr. Bedell and the building principals set the culture of their schools, hire teachers, etc. They're curious on how you envision working with them to carry out your ideas. And we could start with Tanisha.
All right. I would start off by saying I'm by no means an expert when it comes to special education, but when I look at the data and I see the students that are considered to be the most marginalized students, and those students being the ones that we are seeing the worst outcomes for, special needs students and low income students are a part of that equation, in addition to Black and Brown students. And so I think it's definitely a conversation that we need to continue to have. I think that it's important to make sure that we are communicating regularly with parents, making sure that they know what their rights are, making sure that they are very familiar with the resources that are provided to students who have specialized needs, and that they are easily accessible as well. I think that that is definitely a district responsibility in making sure that we are providing those things. One thing that I think is really special about the district is that the district serves and supports all kinds of students. And I think that that's an opportunity for Kansas City Public Schools to really share on a greater way in our community, that any student is welcome, and we are going to be able to provide the resources and the supports that every student needs in order for them to be successful. And so I think that's where we start, but then we just make sure that all parents are aware and are getting the resources that they are legally supposed to be having at the individual school level, and then making sure that the structures are in place, that if they are not receiving those resources on the school level, they have the systems in place to be able to elevate that to the next level. So that is my response to the first part of the question. Is there any way, Alec, you can repeat the second part, or did you want Candace to answer the first part and then I come back and answer the second?
I like that idea. We'll go ahead and move on with Candace, and then I'll go ahead and reiterate that second question.
Okay.
To Tanisha's earlier point of, listening and learning, I think it is absolutely imperative that I do that as a board member. I'll also name that I'm not an expert. I do know a little bit about it, just being a teacher and having a classroom lens. But I am in no way an expert. And so I think this is a great opportunity for me as a board member to understand where we are, the state of special education within our district. And that comes with listening to our parents and our student experiences. I think that when we talk about equity, we have to talk about funding, right? So taking a really close look at where our funding is, and I would be interested to know exactly why our students are fleeing the district to go to charter schools. So what is it that charter schools are offering, parents of students in special ed? What are they offering so that they are fleeing? Where do we need to fill some gaps within the district? And so I think it's critical that we do it. We are able to do it. And I think we just we have to tap in, and we have to listen. We have to allocate resources. We have to collaborate with existing organizations in order to do this work.
And I'm going to actually jump in here. Thank you, Tanisha and Candace, for those responses. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. And again, thank you to our guests for attending today. A final question for you all, and it's going to be a two-part question. First, what are any final words from you? Anything that we have not covered that you want to make sure to share with the community? And then second, if you're going to meet a musician today, who would it be and why? So Candace, we'll start with you.
Could you repeat the second question, please?
Yeah, if you were going to meet a musician today, who would it be and why?
If I was going to be a musician today?
If you were going to meet a musician.
Oh, sorry. My internet is really, really spotty. Could you repeat the first question so I'm clear?
Absolutely. Any final words that you may want to share with anybody, with our guests?
Yes. So thank you, everyone, for being here, for BLAQUE and for Ed Revolution for leading, hosting this forum. If I could say some closeout words, I would say that I am a mom who is fiercely dedicated to this district and to education, as a parent, as an educator, as an advocate. It is very critical, aside from my campaign, that we have folks in leadership positions that understand the educational landscape and who have invested interest in the district. And when I say interest, I'm not talking about the Whisper campaign. I'm talking about interest in our students, interest in student achievement and greater academic outcomes for our kids, because they can achieve, and they need people in place that know that they can achieve and have set a high expectation for teaching and learning, and for board policy, and folks who truly understand and really care about what's going on in our district. I will name for you that we have to be innovative. We have to be creative. We have to move the needle. And we do that by ensuring that folks are in seats who are going to push the needle, who are going to put a sense of urgency behind the most important components of a strong district. So I appreciate everyone's time. Please feel free to reach out to me via social media. That's Candace, Kandace for KCPS, or you can go to my website at candaceforkcps.com. Thank you.
No musician, huh?
Oh, and if I could meet a musician, oh my goodness, y'all gonna laugh at me, but I'm part of the Beehive, so I'm ride or die Beyonce.
That's fair. Thank you for that. Tanisha, same question.
I just want to thank you all again for the opportunity to be in community today. I have enjoyed our conversation. I am Tanisha Nooner Ford, and I am here. I approached this opportunity to serve my community with the purest of intentions and with a desire to just see our school district go to the next level. I love Kansas City Public Schools. I made a choice. My husband and I made a conscious choice when we were deciding where we were going to live. And even before we had children, we made the conscious decision to live in this district because both of us were products of this district. Our parents and family members were products of this district, and so many other people that we love, respect, and admire are products of this district. And so I have made that choice to put my kid in this experience because I believe in the power of this school district, and I see so much opportunity and potential. I am supportive of all of the great work that has happened over the last few years. I think that we have a wonderful gift in Dr. Bedell, and I appreciate all that he's been able to do for us in the last few years. And I hope that we are able to keep him here a little bit longer. But it's just my choice in listening to conversations over the years. There are a lot of family members and community folks that do question the quality of our schools, and they question if Kansas City Schools is going to be the right place for their children. I believe that Kansas City Public Schools does have the potential to be a viable, best fit option in our community. And so it is just my hope and my intentions to do all that I can using my experience, my voice, and my resources to help be a part of that solution. I realize that I am only one person, and all knowledge, all information doesn't reside with me. I am not the savior and don't intend to try to be that as a board member. But I do know that we have all of the tools that we need right here in our community to improve our school district. So I look forward to the opportunity to partner with elevating all of the voices that are here in our community and hoping to implement the vision and values that our community wants to see in our school district. So thank you again for the opportunity, and I would love to have your support in making our children our priority on April 6th by voting for Tanisha. If I had to think of a celebrity that I would want to meet, I'll give you one deceased and one alive. The first person I would say is probably Whitney Houston, because I'm just a super fan and I'm an 80s baby, and it just takes me back to that time. I love people who have vocal ability, and she's one of the greats. And then the person that I would add who's alive today, who I think is another vocal great that doesn't get the credit she deserves, is Brandy. She's one of my favorite singers, and I would love to meet her. She is a homegirl in my head. So that's who I would say.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tanisha and Candace. I just want to give a special shout out to Alec Martinez, educator within the KCPS district, and helping us live out our mission of Revolución Educativa, to build sustained collective power within the Latino community. I know that there are questions on there that we weren't able to get to. I assume that you as candidates are open to receiving emails or getting those questions asked on social media, and you provided that information for us. So thank you all again, and thank you to our partners at BLAQUE for their co-hosting of this event. Appreciate all of our attendees. Just a quick request, go out and vote if you're able to on April 6th. I believe that's the election, correct? Yes, April 6th. It is important and critical for the future of our community. Thank you all. I wish that you all have a phenomenal rest of your day.